A lone samurai avenges the destruction of his clan. The spring wind carried the scent of plum wine and freshly tilled earth through the valley, winding between rice paddies and stone paths like a whispered lullaby. It rustled the pale pink cherry blossoms above, dislodging a gentle snowfall of petals that drifted across the roofs of thatched houses and the shimmering surface of the koi pond near the temple gates. The village of Hanamura had always been a quiet place, a cradle of peace nestled in the cradle of the Katsura Mountains. It was a place where blades rusted in their sheaths and laughter echoed louder than war drums. The boy ran barefoot through the orchard paths, a wooden practice sword strapped to his back. His name was Hiroto, 8 years old, eyes like polished onyx, gleaming with the carefree light only a child could carry. He was the youngest son of Lord Nakamura, master of Hanamura, and a pupil of the old way. His days were filled with training, chores, and watching his elder brothers duel beneath the shadow of the cherry trees, the petals falling like blessings from heaven. That morning, his father had smiled at him from the veranda, sipping tea as the sun broke the ridge. "You are light on your feet, hero," he had said, voice deep as a drum. "One day, your blade will dance as the wind does." But the wind carried more than petals that day. It began as a low rumble, like distant thunder. The first plume of smoke curled above the southern ridge, just as the temple bell rang for midday prayer. By the time the priest's chant faltered, the village was already aflame. Riders appeared like phantoms from the misted tree line, men in black armor without mon, their faces hidden behind snarling masks of iron. They swept through Hanamura like a scythe through wheat, cutting down peasants and samurai alike. The blossoms, once so gentle in their descent, now fell over blood and ash. Hiroto froze in the orchard, breath caught in his throat as screams tore through the air. He dropped his practice sword and ran, his feet pounding the dirt path toward the manor. But the fires had already reached it. The great gates lay shattered, and smoke poured from the halls of his ancestors. A hand seized him from behind. It was his father. Lord Nakamura was wounded, his white robes scorched, a deep gash along his side. Blood soaked through the silk like spreading ink. His katana was drawn, the steel singing with each shallow breath. "Hero," he said, his voice strained but firm, "you must listen. There is no saving Hanamura. They have come for our name." "But father, the others, mother, the guards." "Gone," his father said. His grip tightened around the boy's shoulders. "This is not your end, hero. You must live. You must learn. And one day, you must return." Tears welled in the boy's eyes. "I don't understand." "You will. In time." Lord Nakamura pushed something into his son's hands, a small lacquered box, warm from being pressed to his chest. "Take this to the mountain temple. The monks will keep you safe." A shadow fell across the courtyard, a figure clad in black, blade drawn. "Go!" his father roared, rising to meet the enemy with a roar of steel. Hiroto turned and fled. He ran through burning fields and shattered gates, past corpses and crumbling prayer stones. The mountain path was steep and winding, but he did not stop. His lungs burned, his legs trembled, but he ran. When he reached the forest canopy, dusk had fallen. Behind him, Hanamura blazed like a pyre. He collapsed beneath an ancient cedar tree, the box clutched to his chest. He dared not open it. All he could do was cry. The cherry blossoms still fell, carried high into the sky by the wind. That night, as Hiroto curled into himself and whispered prayers to gods he no longer believed in, A new wind stirred in the branches above. It was not soft. It howled like a blade drawn from its sheath. And in its song, vengeance was born. Chapter 1. Steel and Silence. The years had carved Hiroto into something leaner, colder, sharper. No longer the wide-eyed child clutching the dying hand of his father beneath a sky of burning petals, he was now a shadow, drifting from province to province, nameless, faceless, yet feared. A ronin with no master, no home, and no mercy. He never stayed long. Towns barely remembered his face, but they remembered the duels. Men who drew blades for pride, gold, or glory, often left with broken hands or worse. The whispers followed him, of a swordsman who never spoke, whose eyes held storms, who fought with precision bordering on divine. Farmers called him the windless blade. Soldiers called him death in straw sandals. Hiroto spoke little, and when he did, it was in clipped, spare syllables that betrayed nothing. His companions were the blade at his hip, and the memories that refused to fade. He spent nights under trees or temple eaves, polishing his katana, meditating in silence. In the stillness, he relived the fire, the screams, the cherry blossoms trampled in blood. Sometimes he awoke with his blade drawn, breath short, hand trembling. But the sun always rose, and he kept walking. He honed his sword not for honor or fame, but for vengeance. Every duel was a test, every fight a step closer. And so he wandered, a ghost in a country bleeding from 1,000 warlord wounds. Chapter 2. Ghosts and Ash. In a dusty inn on the edge of Chikuzen province, Hiroto heard the name. A drunken soldier, loud with cheap sake and swagger, boasted about his time in the army of Lord Daizan. The name struck Hiroto like a blade to the chest. Daizan, the warlord whose banners bore a crimson hawk. The man who led the slaughter of the Takeda clan. His clan. Hiroto sat in silence, sipping rice wine, listening. The soldier bragged of Daizan's palace in Kaga, his victories, his cruelty. A tyrant cloaked in power, protected by steel and fear. That night, Hiroto returned to the forest and stared into the fire, memories surging like a tide. His father's voice echoed, "Live, learn, avenge." Until now, Hiroto had wandered without purpose beyond survival. Now the path was clear. Daizan lived, and Daizan would die. But vengeance was a blade that demanded patience. He would not rush into death. He needed to know more. Who else had bathed their hands in his clan's blood? He would find out. Chapter 3. The Black Scroll. The scroll came from a monk in a remote temple nestled in the northern mountains. The monk, old and blind, greeted Hiroto like an old friend. "You carry the fire of Takeda," he whispered, "and the shadow." Hiroto bowed, unsure how the monk knew his name or blood. "There are things you must see," the monk said, and pressed a black lacquered scroll into his hands. Its wax seal bore the sigil of a forgotten shogunate. That night, Hiroto read by lantern light. The scroll was ancient, but the ink smelled fresh. It spoke of a pact, a secret alliance formed 20 years ago. Lord Daizan had not acted alone. 3 lords had stood beside him. Lord Inaba, the Fox of the East, master of spies and deception. Lord Kuromori, the Iron Bear, whose soldiers had burned the Takeda village. Lady Arasaka, the Crimson Widow, who bankrolled the war with her clan's immense wealth. Together, they had dismantled the Takeda clan for land, power, and fear. Daizan was the sword. They were the hand. Hiroto stared into the fire, the scroll clutched tight. He could not kill Daizan yet. Not until the others had paid. He would sever the hand before cutting off the head. One by one, he folded the scroll, slid it into his pack, and stood. His war had begun. Chapter 4. The mountain general's snow fell in heavy sheets across the cliffs of Mount Ryugai. At its peak sat a fortress carved from rock, guarded by spearmen trained in the northern style. Here ruled General Kenzaki, a brutal tactician once famed for crushing entire provinces beneath his heel. Renji approached under the cover of blizzard and dusk. Scaling the rear wall with ice-cut fingers, he entered the fortress like a phantom. Guard patrols vanished with muffled gasps. His blade left no second strikes. He found Kenzaki meditating on a cliffside terrace, armored, waiting. "I knew a ghost would come for me," the general said, rising. Their duel raged atop the snowy cliff. Steel sang, blood steamed on the cold stone. Finally, Renji disarmed the brute and pressed his blade to his throat. "Any last words?" Kenzaki smiled. "Only that your fire will consume you." Renji drove the blade through his heart. The general toppled backward, disappearing into the storm below. Chapter 5. The Crimson Courtesan. In the refined elegance of the Lotus Pavilion, silk whispered and fans fluttered. Lady Yuna, once called the Crimson Courtesan, held court among poets and spies. Renji entered in disguise, posing as a traveling poet. His verses won him an invitation to her private table. Over lacquered trays and perfumed wine, their conversation danced, a battle of riddles, smiles, and veiled truths. "I know why you're here," she said at last, fingering a camellia. "But I wonder, have you considered what vengeance leaves behind?" In the moonlit garden, among falling petals, they faced each other. She did not resist. Her dagger fell to the stones. "Do it, and become what they made you." Renji's blade pierced her heart. The camellia petals turned crimson as she fell. Chapter 6. The Merchant of War. In a walled compound along the Silk Road, gold glinted and servants bowed. Takanobu, the Merchant of War, sat bloated among his riches. He had sold weapons to Daizan, outfitted armies, feasted on the profits of death. Renji walked through his gates unannounced. "I'm here for your soul," he said, drawing his sword. Takanobu wept. "Please, I was only a businessman. I didn't kill anyone." For the first time, Renji hesitated. He saw not a warrior, but a coward, a worm. But the memories of Hanamura burned anew. Steel flashed. When it was done, he left the merchant's vaults untouched. Let the gold rot with the corpse. Chapter 7. Blood on the Silk Road. Renji wandered south, the desert wind cooling his rage. At a small shrine, he knelt to wash his hands. A boy appeared, ragged, barefoot, holding a wooden sword. His village had burned. His family was gone. Renji stared at the child. The boy reminded him of himself. He left a pouch of gold in the boy's hands. "Find a teacher," he said. "Live." That night, beneath the stars, Renji stared at the blade in his hands. "3 are dead," he whispered. "Only Daizan remains." But the weight of his deeds lingered. The line between justice and revenge had blurred. Still, he rose. One path remained, and he would walk it to the end. Chapter 8. The Demon Castle. A storm brewed as the lone samurai stood at the edge of the demon's spine, the towering, jagged fortress where Lord Daizan reigned. Thunder rolled over distant hills, echoing through the desolate valley below. Lightning briefly lit the black stone walls, revealing banners that once bore the symbol of peace, but now fluttered like shrouds of conquest. Wrapped in a faded cloak, his katana bound tight at his side, The samurai stepped onto the winding road leading to the castle gates. Rain lashed down, soaking his hair and robes, but he moved like a spirit given flesh, silent, unstoppable. Each step through the mire was a prayer of defiance. The guards at the gate stared in disbelief. Before they could raise their alarm, his sword flashed, a memory of vengeance made steel. They fell without a cry. He pushed forward. In the distance, horns sounded. Daizan knew he had come. Chapter 9. The Thousand Blades. The corridors of the demon's spine were cold and narrow, designed for siege and slaughter. The walls bore marks of hundreds of battles, scars of steel upon stone. Yet tonight they would weep fresh blood. A gauntlet awaited him. Daizan had summoned his finest, Ronin mercenaries, elite guards, and shadow-cloaked assassins. They came in waves, blades singing, armor clashing. The samurai met them with grace and fury. Each motion was deliberate, precise, an expression of his journey, his loss, his oath. Blades clashed in the torch-lit hall, blood mixed with rainwater running through the broken roof tiles. A spear pierced his shoulder. He stumbled, but with a roar he rose, cutting through 3 men with a single stroke born of pain and memory. On the upper ramparts, he fought against a twin-blade master who had never known defeat. They battled between stone spires, with wind howling and rain blinding. The samurai was wounded again, a slash across the ribs, but his resolve burned brighter. He slew the master and collapsed against the wall, gasping, bleeding. He tore a strip of his cloak and bound his side. There was no time for rest, only forward. Chapter 10. The Last Duel. At the heart of the fortress stood a chamber of obsidian and fire. Lord Daizan waited there, garbed in black armor edged in gold, a daisho at his side. His silver hair was tied back, his face as hard as the stone beneath his feet. "So, the last cherry blossom blooms at my gate," Daizan said. "I wondered when you would come." The samurai did not speak. He stepped into the circle of firelight, drawing his sword slowly, reverently. Daizan stood. "You seek justice. But what is justice? Your clan stood in the way of peace. I united the provinces. I ended war. Rain battered the roof above as if the heavens demanded silence. You destroyed families," the samurai said, voice hoarse. "You built your peace on ash and bone." "And I will do so again," Daizan answered, drawing his blade. "Come then, ghost of vengeance. Let us end it." Their duel began like a storm reborn. Thunder cracked, and lightning flared through the skylight as steel met steel. The floor grew slick with rain and blood. Each strike was the clash of philosophies. Domination versus honor. Conquest versus memory. The samurai moved slower now, wounds dragging him down, but Daizan was older, and his strength was no longer absolute. They fought across the chamber, through broken statues and flaming braziers. At last, with a final cry, the samurai disarmed Daizan and drove his blade through the warlord's chest. Daizan gasped. "You were never supposed to live." The samurai knelt as Daizan fell, sword still embedded in the floor. Rain poured through the shattered roof, washing blood from his face. He stared up at the storming sky, his breath shallow. Footsteps echoed. Lana, the orphan he had spared and gifted gold to years ago, now a healer traveling with the resistance, entered with a search party. She knelt beside him. "You did it. You're free." His eyes fluttered. Not free, but finished. Then, darkness. Epilogue. Beneath the blossoms, the storm had passed, leaving only silence and the scent of rain-soaked earth. Where once stood the demon's spine, that grim fortress of black stone and bloodied iron, now only ruins remained, collapsed towers and scorched stone, blanketed by mist. A lone boy stood among the remnants, his travel-worn feet soaked from the morning dew. He was no longer the wide-eyed orphan shivering by the roadside, but taller now, leaner, hardened by seasons of survival. His clothes were patched, his sandals thin, but his eyes burned with clarity. He had followed the trail of whispers, merchants' tales, and drunken songs. They spoke of a man, one swordsman, who had cut through 100 warriors in a single night. They called him a demon, a ghost, a storm in human form. The boy knew better. He found the samurai's body beneath a half-collapsed cherry tree on the hill above the ruins. The warrior lay on his back, katana resting across his chest, the rain having washed away the blood. His expression was calm, almost peaceful, as though death had brought a kind of grace the world had denied him in life. Petals fluttered above, early blooms defying the season. Even in this broken land, the cherry blossoms remembered. The boy knelt. He did not cry. Instead, he set to work, gathering stones, digging into the wet soil. Each movement was quiet reverence. No monks would chant, no noble would commission a shrine. But still, he would not leave him to rot in the open. When the grave was ready, he placed the samurai's blade beside him, then folded the warrior's hands over a small bundle he had found strapped to his chest, a weathered scroll tied in red silk. The boy waited until the sun broke the clouds before he opened it. Inside was the samurai's journal, pages scarred with rain and blood, ink blurred in places, but the words remained. I was the last of the Hoshikage clan. They came under moonlight, with fire and steel. I was a child, useless, afraid. My father said, live, learn, avenge. I did. But now I wonder, did vengeance bring peace, or did it hollow me further? To the one who finds this, if you still believe in honor, in stories, then carry this. Not for me, but for those who had no voice. Let them be remembered not for how they died, but for how they lived. The boy closed the scroll, holding it against his chest. I remember you, he whispered. Even if the world forgets, I will not. He built a cairn of smooth stones above the grave. Simple, but enduring. Atop it, he placed a single wooden carving, something he had whittled by firelight over many nights. A fox, the emblem of the Hoshikage clan, its tail curled in eternal vigil. Then he bowed, low and long. Years later, the tea house was modest, cedar walls stained with age, floor mats worn but clean. Lanterns cast a warm glow, and travelers sat shoulder to shoulder, sharing warmth and sake. On nights like this, when the snow gathered outside and the wind howled, stories bloomed like spring flowers. And tonight, they had a storyteller. He stood in a plain kimono, a bundle of scrolls at his side. His voice was calm but rich, drawing eyes and ears like a magnet. He spoke of a child who had lived through fire, of a sword passed down through silence, of blood on snow, petals in rain. He spoke of vengeance, of a samurai with no master, walking alone through the provinces like a shadow, of a fortress called the Demon's Spine, and a final battle beneath thunder and moonlight. And when he was done, silence lingered, deep and respectful. A child in the crowd raised a hand. What happened to the samurai? The storyteller smiled. He rests beneath a cherry tree, but his spirit walks still, wherever honor lives. Was it all true? Someone asked. The battles? The lords? The swords? The storyteller reached into his satchel and held up a scroll, yellowed, sealed in red silk. These are his words. I carry them with me, so no one forgets. Someone whispered, "What was his name?" The storyteller paused, his fingers brushing the scroll like a sacred relic. They called him the Last Blade. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and slow, like pale blossoms from the heavens, and beneath a tree far away, in a grave of stone and silence, the wind whispered through the petals, "Remember,